Welcome to Yes-MLS. You are watching the listing input tutorial, and in this tutorial we will cover logging on, adding a listing, adding photos, attachments, virtual tours, and open houses to that listing, and then finally making status changes to that listing. Let's go ahead and get started. To log into the MLS, the best site to navigate to is neorex.mlsmatrix.com, and that's neohrex.mlsmatrix.com. You'll see an ID and password box. Your ID is either your license number assigned by the state or a personal assistant or support staff ID assigned by our membership department. You should have received an email from our membership department that included your ID and temporary password. The very first time you log on, enter your user ID and password, choose Login, and you'll be taken to a screen that will ask you to agree to our terms and conditions, enter answers to secret questions in order to retrieve your password should you forget it, and a link into the NeoRex system. In the future, just entering your ID and password will take you to our dashboard that has many valuable resources. Please take note that at the bottom right corner of this screen, if you ever want to change your password, you simply click on I want to change my password, and you'll be prompted to enter your old password and then your new one. We'll go ahead and log in. The dashboard has many resources to the different services and products that we have available. Many are free, and some do have an additional charge associated with them. To get into the MLS, you simply click on the Matrix MLS app. That's the very first one shown on that page. And again, the first time you log into the MLS, you'll have to agree to the subscriber agreement. You need to scroll to the bottom of this page, check the box that says I have read and accepted the terms, and then choose I accept. I accept will only be displayed if you've checked the box above that says you've read and accepted the terms. Each time you log into the MLS, you'll see the home page. And most likely, you'll see news and alerts that pop up. We highly recommend that you read these news and alerts. They include things such as rules changes, system changes, and system issues that we may be having. The homepage has many panels that you'll find helpful. When working with your listings, you'll find the My Listing panel will bring attention to those listings that may need attention, including your incoming listings, your listings missing photos, and your listings due to expire soon. Those will be highlighted in red should you have any of those. You can access any of your listings from that panel. However, we encourage you to use the Input tab to make any changes or add listings in the system. The Input tab is located across the top. You can access or add any listings from here. Let's go ahead and add a new listing. It is important to select the correct property type on this screen. Should you choose the incorrect property type, you are not able to go into that listing and switch that once it's saved. So do make sure that you pay close attention and select the correct property type before getting started in entering your listing. In our example, we're going to use a residential property type. Notice in blue across the top, you have three options to enter this listing. You can fill from our realist tax data. That's very nice. It includes certain fields that get auto-populated. You can also copy a listing that was already in the system, or you can start with a completely blank listing. For our example, we're going to fill from realist. In this scenario, you need to select your county. You can either scroll in the list or type the name at the top, and then enter one of the following: a parcel ID, a street number and name, or an owner name. We'll go ahead and use an address. The property we're listing is 1010 Main Street. Once entered, click search or press enter on your keyboard and it will find that property. If this is correct, go ahead and click fill on the left. That will go out to our realist tax data. gather information and automatically populate that in the system. Please be aware that any data automatically filled in from Realist can be changed or deleted. When entering a new listing, you have 3 different choices of statuses. The first is incoming. That is a status that allows you to start this listing, save it, and finish it later. By choosing incoming, no one else sees this except you and your support staff in your office, and it has not yet satisfied the 48-hour rule. We encourage you to start your listings in incoming and save it periodically as you go through. The coming soon status allows you to enter that listing, make it available for other agents to see. It will include an expected active date when that listing will move from the coming soon status to active. And in that status, you must fill in all required fields, and that listing will be available for anyone to view and share in the system. It cannot be shown. The final status is active. If you choose active, that listing will go live and will be available for everyone to see. With both coming soon and active, all required fields must be filled in. If fields are missing or incorrect, you will get a warning, and those must be corrected and filled in before that listing can be saved. In our example, we're going to start with the incoming status, and then we'll move that to the active status throughout the tutorial. Please note that any field that is red with an asterisk is required. Let's go ahead and move through the tabs across the top. The process is not difficult. It just takes some time to get through the different screens. Again, we'll move through the tabs across the top and save this listing as incoming. We'll add our photos before we make that listing live. Let's go ahead and move through the tabs. With the Agent Info tab, your license number will be filled in if you're the listing agent. If you're a support staff, you'll need to fill in that information. It's looking for a number, not a name. So if you don't have that agent's ID, you'll need to choose the Find an Agent link and look it up. Once you enter a new number, choose Refresh. However, if it's already filled in for you, you'll note that your name and company are already filled in. As we scroll through the page, notice that some fields are not required, and those are in black. Those that are required, again, are in red with an asterisk. We would encourage you to fill in as much information as possible. The buyer's broker compensation is required. This is what you're paying the other agent involved in the transaction. You never disclose the full compensation. If you have a graduated compensation amount, make sure to select that, and then compensation needs to be explained if you have dual, graduated, or variable. Please make sure that you are very specific in your compensation explanation. Moving across the top, we'll go to the General Information tab. Notice we have some information that's already filled in. It included our county, the parcel ID formatted correctly, the address, and a few other fields. Let's first take a look at the map on the left. Anytime you enter a new listing using Realist tax, it will say Map Not Found. Simply click Step 1, highlighted in yellow below the map, to get the latitude longitude from the address. Based on the address entered, it will plot that property. It's a good idea to click Step 2 below the map that says Set Lat Long, and make sure that that did indeed plot in the correct location. You can click the parcel and it will identify that property, highlighting it in purple and showing the address and the owner name. If that's correct, you can click Done. If it's not correct, you could pick that pin up and move it to where it's supposed to go. If you need to reset the map pin, simply click Reset below the address and it will move that pin where it was originally plotted. You can either click Cancel if you don't need to save those changes, or click Done to save those changes. And the third step in the mapping function is to choose your Google Street View. You as the list agent have control over how that initial view displays within the MLS. This is a good example of a listing that doesn't plot very well. The property happens to be over to the right. So on the Google Street View screen, we can drag our screen to see that house. However, this is not much better. What we would like to do is to have our view show the front of the house. You can move with your mouse over to the other street, click there and spin. You can also zoom and tilt until you get it exactly the way you want. And when you're happy with that Google Street View, click OK. This will store that, and once that listing is made available, anyone who receives it in an email or any agent looking at that listing will have the Google Street View that you set. Keep in mind that you're not changing the Google default. You're simply changing the way it displays in our system. You'll continue to fill in red required fields. Area is one that can be a little bit tricky. It is filtered by county, so when we click on that drop down, you would choose the appropriate area associated for that property. In a few counties, which include Lorain, Cuyahoga, and Geauga counties, we have an option in the map to see the area boundaries. If we go back to set lat longitude, you can turn on the areas button by choosing the map layers and click MLS areas. And for the counties where we have MLS area boundaries outlined, you'll be able to see the different outlines for those MLS areas. Cleveland tends to be one of the tricky ones, so this is very helpful. You would see your map pin, and then you could identify which area to use. In this case, we don't have the boundaries for Erie County. This listing's in the city of Huron, so we'll use the Huron area identified. For school districts, we do not filter those by counties. Because so many of them can cross over, we have one school district list, and you'll simply click the drop down here and you'll type your school district name and then select it. As we scroll through, again, make sure to fill in any red required fields. List date, you can either type the date or use the calendar. Same with expiration date. Your list price needs to be entered with all the zeros, no commas, no dollar signs. And if this were a coming soon listing, you would be required to fill in the expected active date. If your listing is simply incoming, that will move directly to active, or that you're making active right away, the expected active date is not required. For those listings that are auction type listings, we have two different types: online bidding or auctions. Online bidding is where you use a website to post your bids. Auction listings is where we have a live auctioneer and a specific date and time that auction will be held. Please note that your listing cannot be both online bidding and auction. It's one or the other. Under loan and tax information, it's helpful to include information that's not required, including ownership. Those properties that are bank owned, it's very helpful to see that the ownership here is bank. If you are an agent owner, that is required to be disclosed. You can simply choose agent. And if you have a rental property where the person owns it but doesn't live in it, that would be considered principal NR, principal owner, non-resident. Financing is also not required, but very helpful when people are looking for certain financing types. When you fill this in, those that can only use FHA or VA can quickly find your listings. In the taxes field, we're looking for annual taxes that are currently paid today. You can find that data either on your realist tax record or the county auditor. It is our policy that you not do any math in this field and that you display what is currently on the tax record. If that property has a deduction due to homestead exemption, please choose Homestead Yes, and again, state what is posted in the tax record that is currently being paid today. If you feel strongly enough to show what the property taxes are without the homestead exemption, you can put that in your remarks section. We would like to see exactly what is shown in the tax record today under annual taxes. Next, we'll use the Features tab. This has quite a bit of information that you need to fill in. Please note that your property can be entered into one subtype only. It is either a single family or a condo, and that is dictated by zoning in the tax record. In our year built detail field, we have several choices. Properties that are completed would be actual year built. New construction is completed construction, not yet lived in. To be built is one that has not yet been started, but permits have been taken. Under construction is used when that property is not yet done and currently being built. Not verifiable and unknown can be used when the year built cannot be determined. You'll still need to fill in a year built date and then choose either not verifiable or unknown. We have two fields for square footage: above grade finished approximate and below grade finished approximate. We use American National Standards Institute's description for our square footage field. It should be fairly straightforward. Square footage that is above ground would be included under above grade finished. Square footage that is finished in below ground would be included in below grade. This includes any square footage that is below grade. That would be walkout basements and basements underground that may have egress. Please note that we do not include attics in our square footage. We recommend that you use your tax or realist record to identify the square footage and fill that in appropriately. And remember, it's only finished square feet. It does not include any unfinished spaces. If you do fill in a square footage field, you'll be required to choose a source. As we move through the screen, notice you have some features that are required and some are not. With these required fields, a few of them have limitations. For example, style, you can only choose 3 different styles. It's important to remember that many people will search on fields even if the entry on listing input is not required. So we again encourage you to fill in all fields that apply so that you get the most hits on your listing. Let's next go to the Rooms tab. Notice again that total rooms, total bedrooms, and bathrooms were filled in automatically from Realist. With our full bath field, it's required to include what levels those are on. So with these 3 bathrooms, we need to know if they're on the upper, main, or lower levels. If we had any half baths, the level for those would also be required. The MLS does not allow you to include bedrooms that are in the basement in the total bedroom count. If you have bedrooms in the basement, you can describe them under the detailed room information. However, they should not be included in the bedroom count. Our board of directors did approve that bathrooms in the basement can be counted. It is not required, but it is helpful when detailed room information is included. We have a drop-down list where you can choose the different room types, and if you choose a room, you do need to tell us what level it's on. The other fields are not required when entering this data. If you want an additional room included, click More on the lower right and continue to include the rooms that you have. A few things you should know here. The order that you see them in the list is the order they will display on your listing. It doesn't matter what order you enter them in. They will automatically be shown in the orders shown here. Eat-in kitchen and kitchen are 2 different types of kitchens. You really typically have just one of them. So if you have a kitchen where you can put a table and have an eat-in kitchen, please include that. And if you've chosen eat-in kitchen, you likely will not choose kitchen. Many people search for master bedrooms on the first floor, so it is very helpful to include that information when entering the room data. And additional living suite, which is also sometimes referred to as in-law suites, is searched quite often, so if you have that, please include that as well. Notice that room sizes, fireplace, window treatments, and flooring is not required here, but it is helpful when reviewing listings. The HOA and Remarks tab includes a few required fields that you need to pay attention to. If your listing has an HOA, which is a homeowners association, please identify that and then tell us who you pay, how much, how often, and what it includes. HOAs are different than maintenance fees. If your property has a maintenance fee, please include it here again who you pay, how much, how often, and what it includes. Note that some properties have both HOA and maintenance fee, and it will be important to include those. On the right, we have a field for restrictions. It's very helpful to include this, especially when you have condominiums or cluster home type properties that have pet restrictions. Please include that pets are allowed. However, there are pet restrictions if that's the scenario. And then it might be a benefit to either include that in the broker remarks or as an attachment, explaining what those restrictions are. As we scroll down, we've got public remarks, broker remarks, and directions. All of these fields have spell check. Please use that. It will identify words that are misspelled with a red squiggle underneath. The public remarks are used to describe the property. This information is shared on public-facing websites as well as included in buyer reports. Broker remarks are used to describe bonuses or additional information that other agents should be aware of. And directions are used to describe how to get to that property. We encourage you to use directionals such as north, south, east, and west. And it is not recommended that you use GPS here. Notice that misspelled words are red and underlined. And if you right-click, you can choose the correct spelling. And finally, we have the lockbox tab. This is not a required field. The purpose of this is to identify if you have an electronic lockbox only. If you do, please select yes and enter that serial number. If you don't use electronic lockboxes, you can simply skip this tab. When we're finished, we click submit, and this will save our listing so that we can finish it later. It is very, very important to remember that anytime you are saving a listing on incoming, you will always see an input warning page where you must, absolutely must, click Submit Listing again in order to save the data that you've entered. If you read the warning here, it actually tells you that. If you did not mean to make it incoming, you can continue editing and go back and switch the status to active, fill in all the required fields, and submit it. If you want to save this to finish it later, on this input warning screen, please click Submit Listing in order to store all the data that you just entered. If you don't click Submit Listing a second time, you will not save any data and you will have to start all over. You will see an Input Succeeded page and a listing number will be assigned to your listing. This ensures that you've submitted the listing, it saved the data that you entered, and it gives you a listing number to confirm that. If you click the listing number, you can see what your listing looks like out in the system today. Remember that incoming listings are those only you and your support staff see. You have not yet satisfied this 48-hour rule, but it is a good way to proof your listing and make sure that what you entered is correct. Your listing is now in the incoming status. It's a good business practice to add your photos before you make that listing active. To pull that incoming listing back up, you'll go to the Input tab If you're an agent, you'll see a select a listing drop-down box only, where you can choose your listing. If you're a support staff, you'll see the agents that you can work with, and then once chosen, you'll see select a listing. You can also type in the listing number if you have it. In our case, we're just going to choose it out of the drop-down list. And from here, we see all the different options we have. To add photos, you'll come down to Manage Photos. Your job is to take those pictures and know where you save them, and adding them is fairly straightforward. For best processing in the MLS, it's recommended that you take your photos landscaped and with a pixel size of 1024 by 768. To add photos, if it's a property that was already listed and the photos are already uploaded, you can choose to copy those as long as you haven't added any other photos. If it's a new listing and you're entering new photos, you'll click to browse and go find them. Please be aware that photos are copyrighted to the photographer. You're not allowed to take anyone else's photos and upload them on your listings. To browse and find those pictures, simply click the Browse button. Remember where you save those. And then upload those pictures. A couple of tricks are as follows. If you click your first property and hold the Control key, you can choose random pictures anywhere in your list. If you click the first photo and hold the Shift key on your keyboard and then click the last photo, it will get the first, last, and anything in between. And if on your keyboard you press Control and the letter A, all photos will be selected. For our example, we'll choose all of these photos and upload them. And you'll see that they quickly upload to the listing. Our rule states that the first picture, which is the primary slot, must be the front of the house. In our example, slot number 6 is the front of the house that we need to move up to the primary slot. In order to move photos in our system, you want to click on the banner that says slot number and click and hold and drag and move those photos around. Notice some of these photos have a little red dashed line around them. Those indicate that they are below the recommended minimum and they may not display as you would like. In this case, you'll probably need to retake those photos. Within each photo, you have an icon that allows you to add text under the picture itself. By clicking the little square icon for photo details, you have an enter description link below the picture where you can type additional information regarding this property. Spell check is also available in the photo description. Once you're finished, click Done and then Save. And to save all of the photos and all the changes that you've made, click the Save button again at the bottom left. There is a note in the photo upload section that states it may take up to 60 minutes for any changes or new photos to be reflected by you, the current user. If anyone else looks at the listing, those changes are available immediately. Due to deep caching on your computer and through the system, those changes might not be apparent to you right away. As long as you see the changes made here, and you've saved this screen, those changes have been implemented. It just may take some time in order for you to see those changes. You can also add supplements. These are things such as lead-based paint disclosure, property disclosures, and any other attachments you would like other agents to see on your listing. Again, start in the Input tab. Pull up your listing, whether you choose it out of the list or type it on the right. And then at the bottom, you'll manage supplements. Supplements have to be PDF type files. They can be 10 megabytes in size or less. You can type a description here. You can tell us what type of file it is in the drop-down list. you'll click Browse, locate that file, and choose to open it. And once you've completed all the steps, choose Upload. It will add that attachment, or what we refer to as supplements, to your listing. The final step is to click the Save button at the bottom left. In this situation, if you had any additional supplements to add, you would change the name, change the supplement type, browse and find the new file, and choose Upload again. And again, once completed, choose Save at the bottom. You also have the ability to add virtual tours. The MLS will include one free virtual tour, compliments of Property Panorama. That tour takes your still photos, turns it into a slideshow, and adds music, and automatically adds that tour to your listing for residential or multifamily type properties. If you have another resource for virtual tours, we allow an unbranded tour to be uploaded to the system. Unbranded means no advertising for you or your company. It will not have any contact information, email addresses, names, or phone numbers within the body of that tour. Most third parties that create virtual tours will provide an unbranded version for you. So please make sure that you do add the unbranded tour to your listing. And to do so, you click Manage Virtual Tours, copy and paste the link for that virtual tour under Virtual Tour 1, or if you have a tour created by the Matterport camera system or something like that that is a 3D type tour, that can be included at the bottom under Virtual Tour 3D. Once you've added that link, you can submit your listing, and that will upload that tour as a link to your listing. Other members of the MLS and listings that are emailed to your customers will have the link to those virtual tours. At this time, we do not have the ability to upload any raw video. If you were to take a drone video or any other raw video, please make sure to post that to an unbranded website and then upload that unbranded website as a virtual tour. Once you've added all of your additional features such as tours, photos, and supplements, you can go back and update that listing and make it active. Again, we always recommend that you use the Input tab, pull up your listing, and then choose Residential Listing Input to get back into that listing and finish filling in the required fields. If you went through and entered all those red required fields, you can change the status to active or coming soon if that's the status you wish to use, and choose Submit Listing. It will be identified with red exclamation points the sections where you've missed a required field. You have an option at the bottom where you can select a link to see all of the fields you missed. It's easier to just move through the tabs and make the corrections where necessary. In our example, it shows that we missed fields on the General Information tab, Features, Rooms, and HOA and Remarks. If we click General Information and scroll down on the page, we'll see what fields we've missed. Those are also identified by red exclamation points. If we choose Submit again, the red exclamation points are removed from the General tab, and then we move to the next tab that has errors. Please note that when you submit a listing that has errors, that data is not yet saved until you've either corrected all the errors and made it active, or move back to the Status tab, change the status to incoming, and submit 2 times in order to save those changes. If you would like to promote your open house in the MLS, you can add public or broker open houses within the system. Come to your Input tab, pull up your listing, and choose to Manage open houses. On this screen, you need to pay close attention to the fields. First, decide whether it's a public or a broker open house, and then choose your date. Make sure that your times are entered correctly. If you're starting at 11 a.m., make sure that you type 11 o'clock and choose the AM option. By default, the active selection will be set to yes. This means that the open house is an active open house. It will occur. Once you submit this, the system will check the date and make sure that it's in the future and leave the active selection to yes. If the system finds that the date has already passed, it will automatically change the active status to no. Once your open house occurs, there's nothing else you need to do. The system will automatically change that from an active yes to an active no. If you have a second open house down the road, it's good business practice to come into the open house input screens and choose more and enter new dates and new times. Once you're finished, you can choose Submit Listing, and that open house will be reflected on the listing itself, and it will be available in open house searches under the Search drop-down menu. In order to show you the process of making the listing active and making status changes, I will be working as a staff member, and you will see a few things that you won't normally see on your end. So as we go into this listing and pull it up, as I mentioned, you can type the listing number and pull it up that way. From here, I want to go to the residential listing input section, change it to active, submit the listing, and work through the features that are not filled in yet required. And I'll do that quickly. The listing is now active. If you click on the link in the Input Succeeded box, you'll see your listing as it would look live for all other agents to see. Only you see the expiration date since you're the listing agent. And as you scroll through, you can see all the listing information that you filled in. Next, I'd like to discuss status changes. Let's work through the process of a typical listing that has an offer written on it. You've entered your listing. It was available for people to have showings. You had an offer written and accepted, and now you have to go into the system and take that listing out of the active status. Remember that in most cases, you have 48 hours to get status changes made. The only exception to that is for closed listings. So in our case, we'll come into the system, we'll pull up our listing. We, again, can either look it up with the drop-down list or enter the listing number. And on this screen, we have options. An offer was accepted, and now we need to put it into the contingent status because our seller wants to continue to show it. The difference between contingent and pending is simply contingent listings. Your seller wants to continue to market, continue to have showings, and will allow backup offers. Pending listings are those where your seller does not want to have any additional showings, and it will be off market. The status is really up to what your seller would like to do. And in our case, we're going to move that to the contingent status. Our seller would like to continue to have showings. When we choose to change to contingent, we need to put the contract date on our listing. And then we need to check what the contingency is. Once you've entered the required fields, and remember, required fields are in yellow, choose Submit Listing. If you see an input warning, choose Submit Listing again. And that status has been changed immediately in the system. Any contingency will be noted at the top next to the contingent status. This one shows contingent on house sale. Once the seller decides that they don't want any more showings, we need to take that listing out of contingent and move it into the pending status. We'll go back to the input, pull up the listing. This time we'll choose to change to pending. Note that the pending date is the contract date. That is the date entered on your purchase agreement. On occasion, this will appear to be well outside the 48-hour rule. That is fine as long as that listing was moved to the contingent status within 48 hours of that contract date. Listings can go from active to contingent or active directly to pending. Contingent is not a required status, it is up to your seller. However, every listing must go to pending before you can mark it closed. Once the title transfers, your listing must be moved into the closed status. Again, we pull up our listing. And we would choose to change it to sold/leased. When you move a listing to sold, you have several required fields: the price, the sold date, how it was closed in the financing used, and the selling agent. The selling agent's number is what's used in this field. If you don't see the number on your contract, you can look up a selling agent's ID by choosing Find a Selling Agent. You can enter the first few letters of the first name and the first few letters of the last name and run that search, and then fill once that agent is found. If you know the number, you can simply type it in. You're allowed to type any additional comments you'd like to share and then choose Submit Listing, and that will mark that listing as sold. You do have additional time in order to get a listing marked sold. However, we at the MLS and other members appreciate the fact that you mark those listings sold as soon as possible. Some other status changes that you may need to make are temporarily off the market and withdrawn. Let's take a look at those. So let's pull up our listing, and if we would like to take our listing temporarily off the market, we must have seller's permission to do that, and we need to have an expected back on the market date in order to mark that listing temporarily off the market. So when you pull up your listing, you'll click Change to Temporarily Off Market. You'll need to enter the date that the seller asked that the listing be taken off market, and then in broker remarks, enter the date you expect it to be returned to back on the market. So in this scenario, we can change this to temporarily off the market, and we expect it to go back on November 30th. And when you submit that listing, it immediately goes to temporarily off the market. That listing is no longer shared online. It should not be shown or advertised. When that listing is ready to be placed back on the market, you'll go into your Input tab, pull up that listing again, change it back to active by choosing Change to Active. If any changes apply here, make those. Remember to remove your expected back on the market date and then submit your listing. If that listing needs to be withdrawn from the MLS, you'll have two choices. Both of those require paperwork. A withdrawn listing can be withdrawn with release or withdrawn no release. When we choose to change to withdrawn, The required fields are withdrawn date and with release, yes or no. You'll enter your withdrawn date. Withdrawn with release, yes, means that your seller and your broker signed a mutual release and that listing is no longer listed. The listing agreement is now null and void. If you choose withdrawn no release no, that listing is still listed with the list office. It is just moving to the withdrawn status in the MLS and is no longer available to be marketed. Withdrawn no release will expire on its expiration date. Withdrawn with release will remain in that status and never expire. Once you withdraw a listing, you can no longer put that back on the market. It is withdrawn from the MLS. This concludes the listing input training. If you have questions, please reach out to our help desk or the MLS Procedures Department. Our phone number is 216-485-4100 or 888-266-7657. MLS Procedures Department is extension 485. The help desk is extension 480. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. Thank you.